Generally regarded as the weakest link in the Legend of Zelda series, The Adventure of Link remains a fun and enjoyable game some 25 years after its release. But why is it considered the weakest link? Well, Zelda 2 basically took everything that made the original Legend of Zelda so unique and threw it in the garbage. It was heavily inspired by Dragon Quest and other RPGs at the time, and they wanted to do something different. Well, pretty much like what everyone else was doing on the NES at the time. The sequels were radically different than the original games. And in this case, Zelda 2 basically has an overworld, much like the original Legend of Zelda. Only difference now is there are random encounters on the overworld. And when you get sucked into battle, the perspective changes to a side-scroller. So you move left and right and have a combat system more akin to Castlevania than the original Legend of Zelda. Link could learn a wide assortment of different sword techniques. There was now magic, so he could, for example, use a shield spell, or he could throw like a fireball from his sword. Just a wide variety of different gameplay elements were included. Some good news is the fact that you didn't need to grind levels, which was very, very useful, because most RPGs at the time required you to do so. No, instead here, you basically just played the game, and as you completed a dungeon, you would automatically gain a level. And the way levels worked was you would increase your sword's attack, you would increase the amount of damage you could take, and you would increase, well actually decrease, the amount of magic that would be consumed by spells. And this was all very, very unique at the time. And for the most part, all of this holds up tremendously well today. The only thing that I can basically say that hasn't aged so well is the brutal difficulty. At the game's onset, if you can make it all the way through to the first dungeon without dying, you've got some pretty good skills. I'm talking about players who have never experienced this game before. For the hardcore Zelda fans, odds are you've got a lot of experience, so it shouldn't be too bad for you. But if you are a new player and you are getting frustrated, I highly recommend you use the Wii U save states, if of course you're playing it on that version. Because the last thing you want to do is get frustrated and never play the game. Something else that hasn't aged too well is the dialogue. Yes, there are towns that Link can visit like during his adventure, and the townspeople will help you sort of pinpoint where you're supposed to go or what you need to continue. That works for the beginning of the game, but very, very quickly it starts to become like a jumbled mess, and you're not going to be sure where you have to go or what you have to do. Thankfully, Zelda 2 is a much more linear game than the original, but I'm pretty sure a lot of people are still going to need a guide in order to make it out alive. Something that hasn't aged particularly well at all are the hitboxes. Certain enemies, especially enemies like the Iron Knuckle, for example, are extremely difficult because you have to hit them at the exact right moment in the right spot, or else they're just going to just rape you pretty much. And for that particular enemy, the Iron Knuckle, the best thing to do is to do like a jump thrust attack. Now you will learn more advanced sword techniques as the game goes on, but in the beginning of the game, even the most simplest enemies can be just brutally difficult. And one of the reasons for this is no enemies drop health, which is just preposterous. You will get health every once in a blue moon, but for the most part, like, you can count on having to do an entire dungeon pretty much without any health. There's usually fairies you can find, and sometimes there'll be health canisters that you can find, but these are exceedingly rare. And speaking of health, there are heart containers in the game which will basically increase the amount of health you have. So, all things considered, Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link is pretty much equal ground to the original Legend of Zelda in terms of how it's aged. Certain elements have definitely aged better than others, but overall this is definitely a game you're going to want to check out if you've never experienced it before. Like I said, make full use of the save states, because otherwise the game, even after all these years, can remain tremendously frustrating. Thank you very much for watching, everyone, and as always, hit up projectcoe.com for the full written review.